All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joe Valero, CERA board member. My privilege to hand this over to our CERA president, Sherry Reed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's so nice to see so many educators here this afternoon, carving out time for some professional learning, which I know can be quite difficult in such a hectic time of year. So thanks for joining us. Before we introduce our speakers this afternoon, I wanted to just take a quick minute to tell you about our conference. We have been deep in planning the conference, which will take place in just 6 short weeks from now, November 6th through the 8th. And the conference will be held in Burlingame, California, which, if you don't know, is right by the San Francisco airport. And we have lined up some very amazing keynote speakers. Our opening keynote this year will be Matt Navo, who is the executive director of CCEE, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. And then we have Drs. Tori Wynn and Vajra Watson, who will be joining us to close out the conference on Friday, November 8th. And they'll share their insights and experiences with the Black Child Legacy Campaign for Transformative Justice and Healthy Futures. In addition to the keynotes, we have many great breakout sessions that have been prepared by our CERA members from across the state. And of course, we'll be hosting our presidential reception, networking reception on Wednesday night, November 6th. They'll be sponsored by ETS. So early bird registration ends on Monday, September 30th. So if you have not already, please be sure you register in the next couple of days. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Joe, who will introduce our speakers for the afternoon.
All right, thank you, Sherry. So it is our privilege to go over and introduce our speakers today. Dr. Jennifer Enns from the Office of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, Teresa Blanchard, Executive Leadership Coach from the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, and Laura Silva from Washington Unified School District. Once again, it's our pleasure to go over and introduce our speakers today. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Jennifer Enns.
Well, once again, good afternoon to everyone. So excited to see everyone in the room and so grateful that you are here with us today. And I am excited, Dr. Jennifer Enns from Fresno County Office of Education. I'm excited to get to share a little bit about some of the work that has truly been a team effort. And so with some of those team members who will also be presenting with me today. And then there's also a couple in the room. Justin Freitas was very much a part of this effort also. So I want to call that out. This has truly been a team effort that we've done. And so getting to share some of the work that we have begun and we are still working on. And then also a district partner, Laura, who will be sharing what her experience has been in doing similar work in a district. So before we launch into that, though, would love to get to know who's in this room right now. And so if you could introduce yourself in the chat, name, role, your site, district, or organization, and then maybe a little bit about what inspired you to sign up for this webinar, or what do you hope to learn today? So I'll give you just a little bit of time to do that. All right, super exciting to see how many of our district and county office partners are here with us, and then the thinking around how we might best support English learners, and seeing a lot of that in the chat right now. And I know Teresa and Laura will be looking at all of those things as they are also thinking about what their sections have to offer for some of those questions that are showing up. So quickly, our agenda for today is the first section. We kind of have this divided into 3 parts. Will just be an overview of the English Learner Networked Improvement Community, or ELNIC, that we have been working on and are currently in process of continuing. And then the work that we've done to link improvement science to the California EL roadmap. And then a little bit of district insight and reflection from a district who has had experience doing that, linking improvement science and the California EL roadmap, and where we were able to have some learning that inspired and informed the work that we were able to do in our English Learner Networked Improvement Community, or ELNIC. And so you'll get to hear from Laura today, who's doing the work in a district right now. So just starting off off where we started was establishing the need for this EL-NIC. And so some of the data points that came up for us or stood out to us that made us think that this might be a need in our county was we noticed that about 1/3 of Fresno County's non-charter districts that are eligible for DA were eligible for the EL student group. And it was at least one of the qualifying areas being in academics. I'm going to talk a little bit more about differentiated assistance in a little bit for those of you who may not be familiar with differentiated assistance. And but that's a California accountability piece. And so that was one of our notices. Another one of our notices is that in Fresno County, the English learner student group was one of the lowest performing student groups in both ELA and math. And then we also had some lists that went out about, and that had identification of non-reclassified LPAC level 4 students for districts. And then the questions that our team really our leads around English learners, which include on the assessment side, Joe and Teresa, questions about how best to support English learners, which is many of you are in here, as I saw from the chat, asking similar questions. And so based off of that, we thought that perhaps there would be room to do an English learner NIC or networked improvement community and invite our districts in for that learning. And our next slide shows a little bit of is a data visualization that Joe and our data team came up with based off of showing that need around academic performance. And I'm going to have Joe go ahead and speak to that more since he was instrumental in making this slide happen.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Enns. So as we're going over and we're looking at this particular slide right here, as we train with Smarter Balanced Summative, whether it's English language arts or math, we like to go over and say, go beyond the donut, right? When we are on the test results for California Assessment's website, we see that initial donut, but it's all students. And we know that we can go beyond it. We can actually filter by student groups. We could see additional information. And so this right here was just a snapshot. We wanted to simplify the view of achievement level for some of our student groups. And so right here, this was for 22-23 public data, public information, just how were some of the different student groups performing. So what you see here are LTELs, are English learners, and not the accountability definition, but the actual just their English language acquisition status while taking Smarter Balanced Summative was English learner. Students with disabilities, foster homeless, and our African-American students. And so what you see here are percentages of students that were standard met, standard exceeded on Smarter Balanced from, once again, the 22-23 school year. And what do we notice? What do we notice about achievement for our student groups? What do we notice? So in the chat right now, what do you notice as you're going over and you're looking at this data right here? This is public information. This one right here is specific to Fresno County, but it mirrors Smarter Balanced across the state of California. What do we notice about student groups, student group performance, specifically long-term English learners and English learners? What do we see right here with the data? Go on and feel free, put it into the chat right now. What do you notice about achievement for LTELs and English learners? Go on ahead and put that into the chat right now. What do we notice? We're seeing performing below students with disabilities. A lot of the times we have the misconception that if we were to just ask somebody, hey, what is our lowest performing student group? A lot of the times we're going to hear students with disabilities. And a lot of the times we have whole divisions. We have, for lack of a better term, sometimes we like to say we have armies of people that go over and support our students with really fantastic, and rightfully so. LTEL is the lowest in ELA and math. And as we go into these sites, as the public information for even the recent administration of Smarter Balanced and English language arts and math, as that goes public, go beyond the donut. Look at your student groups for your organization. They're not going to be too far off from what you see here. And so this is truly a calling. It's one of those, what are we doing? What are we doing for our long-term English learners? What are we doing for our English learners? As we look at the data is really pointing us to areas of need. what might we need to focus on? And so this is just that brief visual. So thank you for going over, adding in your thoughts and what you're seeing with this. But yes, our lowest performing groups are really our English learners and our LTELs. Our English learners and our long-term English learners are being outperformed right now by our students with disabilities, foster homeless, and our African-American students. So really it comes down to what might we be able to do about this? What might we be able to do? And that's what today is going to be about. It's how might we better support our multilingual learners, our English learners, our LTELs. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Enns.
Thank you, Joe. And so a little background too, one of the other pieces was differentiated assistance. So for those of you who may not be familiar with differentiated assistance, it is a California accountability piece. And so districts are eligible for differentiated assistance based off of student groups and by indicators, or actually by priority areas, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. And they have to put identified needs, actions, and services in their LCAP as a result of those student groups. And it is a 2-year eligibility with each dashboard. And so the priority areas in California, there are 4 priority areas that have dashboard indicators. We won't go into all the priority areas. We'll just do the ones that have dashboard indicators on the California dashboard. And so priority area 4 includes academics, and that includes the English Learner Progress Indicator, which is ELPI, the English Language Arts Indicator, and the Math Indicator. And so that, and when we noticed our districts that were eligible for DA based off of the EL student group, all of them were eligible for priority area 4 and another area, because you do have to be eligible for 2 priority areas. But our focus, we really zeroed in on priority area 4, which was that student achievement, which includes the LP, ELA, and math. And so that was another component as we were looking at how might we best support Fresno County districts in the work in supporting English learners. Our next thinking then was it would be great to incorporate learning of our districts together and be able to accelerate the work that they're doing around change ideas and accelerate that learning. And so we thought that the format that might work for this would be what's called a networked improvement community. So this comes to us from the improvement science world and Carnegie specifically. And so what is a networked improvement community, or a NIC? And so we actually shared this quote with our teams, our districts that gathered together. We shared this with them on the first NIC meeting. And so a network improvement community provides a promising approach for solving persistent problems in education. They utilize a continuous improvement framework grounded in improvement science, embrace variation that may occur across differing contexts, and engage both practitioners who are closest to the problem alongside with outside experts. And so this is the format that we decided to bring our districts together in order to support learning around supporting English learners. We really wanted to accelerate that learning and to bring our content experts in. And this has truly been a team approach. I want to bring that back together. We are a team of 5 people. We have a data analyst, we have Joe and Teresa, who bring that assessment lens and data lens in also, and they have a lot of experience around English learners. And then Justin, who is also on this call, and myself bring in improvement science expertise. And so the team of us, we have 5 of us who are working together in order to map out what are going to be the activities and our lens and our perspectives in support of our districts, in support of English learners. And so the shortened version of that quote here, just kind of like the key bullet points of what is a network improvement community, is it is intentionally designed to bring groups to work together on a common problem and accelerate that learning. Because now I can test a change idea, which is part of the improvement science language there. I can test a change, I can test something, and that learning can be moved across contexts, and we can hear from each other and learn from each other, and perhaps use that learning in order to accelerate the work that we're doing in our district. So some of the key features that are part of a networked improvement community is it is all focused on a common problem. And so we started with with reclassification, because we were seeing a lot in districts around systems with reclassification, and especially with that list that showed that we had a number of unreclassified fours. And then develop a common aim, and we'll talk a little bit more in Teresa's section about where they landed on an aim and how we worked with districts were in different places, and so how we worked with that a little bit. It is action oriented. We're going to be operating in change ideas. We're using common data measures, and so we're living in those two spaces right now of the action oriented and the common data measures. And the idea is to accelerate learning, and we have a commitment to continuous improvement. And so just thinking about that, we'll take a pause because I've given you two big chunks of information about networked improvement communities, and we believe this is key to the work that we are continuing to do with districts and are doing right now. Thinking about a little bit about your own organization or the work that you're doing, thinking about that approach with networked improvement communities, like maybe how might this approach support some work that you're doing, or can you think of something that you might find useful in doing this work? Just with this very brief overview, feel free to throw it in the chat, and I would love to hear what your thinking is. Yes, I'm trying to remember, Valerie, if we don't have the slide in here that actually states it, because I realized later we do show that, but we don't have the problem in there. We did start, Valerie, with reclassification, but you'll see as it evolved, we moved a little bit more, their aim moved a little bit more towards a focus on ELPI, or the English Learner Progress Indicator. So, but we did start around reclassification. And that's the amazing thing about improvement science and networked improvement communities, is it is truly an iterative process. So you might start in one place of thinking, and then as we started to look at data, and as our district started to dive more into data, whether through empathy interviews or through the data that Teresa and Joe and Jacob brought forward, things evolve and shift. And so we have seen that happen over time through this approach. Thank you. Okay, so one of the things that we talk, part of network improvement community says it's a process of improvement science. So thinking about what lens does improvement science bring to this network improvement community? One of the quotes we put in front of people when we talk about improvement science is that every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. And so we very much focused on systems and how the system design is impacting the outcomes that we're seeing, and then diving into our systems in order to see that. In fact, one of the things that we did as part of our diving into our system is we did something called, we have an improvement coach also, and she walked us through a process called a pathway mapping, which is like a process map on steroids. And that pathway map really allowed them to see what their EL systems were like and how complex they were, and where there was opportunity for things to really break down in their system. And so we got to focus in on that as part of their diving into what might be some root causes for the outcomes they were seeing. And so improvement science really is looking at, we have this goal and we have current reality, and then there's a gap. And so on that right-hand side, when we talk about improvement science, it really is looking at the system. It's focused on a problem, and a NIC focuses us on a common problem. And then we're going to investigate, and we're going to work with our users to help solve that problem. And then in the process, we are going to learn by doing. And so we're in there making changes, learning from those changes, and then using that learning to start to scale to our whole system. One of the other things we talk about, actually, this is a slide with many of the other things that we talk about. It's all condensed onto one slide. And we actually just shared with our teams, we just had a NIC on, oh, what was it, Monday that we just did this, right? We just had our first NIC meeting for year 2 on Monday. And we put this slide in front of our teams, and with a pager to dive more deeply into. So some of the components that it's grounded in this framework that we have used called the Model for Improvement, which really asks three key questions. So we're grounded in those three key questions, and then doing that plan, do, study, act cycle to test change. And then thinking about there's the process of improvement, which truly is iterative. And so we're always grounding in that data, and that data is helping us interrogate our theory of improvement, interrogate where we are with our change ideas. And so it is truly iterative, but we start with understand the system, move into focus collective efforts, and generate those ideas for change, and then learn by doing. Our NIC is currently living in this learn by doing phase right now. We had some background work to do before we could get to that point. And then the goal is for spreading and scaling. Another place that we really focused in on is the types of knowledge that we need in order to understand our system and in order to bring forward change ideas, and that there's different types of knowledge, and then the sweet spot in improvement is when all of those types of knowledge are working together. And so that's where we were trying to live throughout our process. And then those improvement mindsets, and you can see in the little bubble above the head there, we are really focused on improvement mindsets of be specific, be user-centered, keep it simple, just start, and embrace failure. And we have a one-pager of what all of these mean to us and what we support. We have that, and we're happy to share if you want. If you're like, hey, wait, I want more information about what all of that means, we are happy to share that with you. We also talked a lot about data and what data would inform the work that we that we would be working with districts. And so using different types of data to see the whole picture. And so we worked a lot with student outcome data that started this. And so districts were able to dive into their student outcome data. And we also wanted them to be looking at qualitative data. So they participated in journey mapping, and they participated in empathy interviews to get that qualitative data from their system and from their users in this system. We also did, as I mentioned, it wasn't a process map, but a pathway map. It's similar, but it really shows how all the people involved in the system and where things might break down. And especially with something as complex as some of the English learner systems, we wanted to show where might be some of those missing places. And so we did that also as a way for them to investigate their system. Another component that we brought into this, and this is so grateful to the expertise of Joe and Teresa, is we wanted to map out, because we were starting this process in January, we wanted to map out what data and what components of the English learner process are happening at different parts of the year, so that we were able to give districts and support districts with kind of like just-in-time data, I guess if you want to call it that. And so we were able to do that and be aware of what they were experiencing at the moments that they were experiencing them. And I want to hand this over to Teresa, because she was so instrumental in developing this Gantt chart, and it's been an amazing tool. So I want to hand it over to her to talk a little bit about it.
Thank you, Dr. Enns. I know Joe and I are both recovering EL program coordinators in our former lives and districts. So when we started talking about, and like Jennifer said, starting in the middle of the year, we really wanted to make sure that if we were asking districts to, take a deep dive into their data, we wanted to give them the most timely information. And, we have in the gray boxes just kind of things that are happening that are a priority for that season, right? So we chunked it into kind of 3 to 4 month time spans, kind of blocking out that last part of the year for kind of a smaller data chunk. So we kind of wanted to see if we could map out, when data would be pouring into our system, what is available, so we can point people in the right direction to learn the most they can about their English learners and the multilingual families and students that they serve.
Thank you, Teresa. And don't mute too quickly, because we're handing it right back to Teresa in just a moment. Final little bit that wraps up this overview section, and then they're going to get to the meat of the work, which I know, as I was kind of doing a little skim of the chat, is the what can I take home with me moments of this, which Teresa and Laura are really going to provide. We do have what we refer to as an arc of the work, and this is our year 2 arc of the work. And so the work that our districts are doing right now is they're fully involved in PDSA cycles around their change ideas. And so we actually just started and talking about how talking about doing those PDSA cycles and how to ramp up those PDSA cycles and what data they might begin to collect around process data. And so during their action periods, that's those little circles in between, they will be completing PDSA cycles, meeting around those. And then when they come back together for November 15th, they will be participating in consultancy. And that's where the learning, so the learning takes place in the PDSA cycles individually. The collective learning takes place when they come together in that consultancy on November 15th. And so when you look across here, what we have mapped out is learning through PDSA cycles, learning through consultancies, and learning through data. And so, thank you so much for that. Yes, I'm speaking improvement lingo. We've been in conferences before where someone puts up a red card. So you just red carded me. Yes, thank you, Laura. It is a plan, do, study, act cycle. And if you want more information about that, I will happily, please feel free to email me. We'll get our emails at the end, and I can send along some plan, do, study, act information for you for sure. Thank you for red carding me right there. I am going to hand it off to Teresa now to start talking about how we wove improvement science and the EL roadmap together.
Thank you, Dr. Enns. We are really just so excited about the work that we've done with both individual districts in kind of the last 2 years, and then really starting this NIC when we noticed, as Jennifer had shared, some of the data around how many districts were qualifying based on their English learner student group, and trying to figure out if we could kind of bring them together and replicate some of the things that were working. And there's some people in the room here that should also be speaking with us, but they can also, kind of vouch for just the beautiful kind of weave of the improvement science process and the EL roadmap policy that really gives us, and you're seeing the principles here mapped out. This is policy that's been around since 2017 when it was passed unanimously by the State Board of Education. And it's now 7 years old, but we know, based on some of the conversations we've had with districts and with so much kind of turnover sometimes within districts, not everyone has had a chance to really dig into this policy. But when we started talking about, our theory of improvement and our improvement science approach in supporting the schools and districts that qualify for differentiated assistance, we felt very strongly, and I felt very strongly that, these principles really can help us drive the work. Quite literally, when we get to our theory of improvement, you'll see that we can use these as drivers and kind of operational definitions around where we might want to focus our energy and what levers we might want to kind of pull to develop, change ideas and to allow our districts kind of the autonomy to choose, like, what, out of these 4 principles, where might I need to focus and what change ideas can I generate that we can PDSA and test out to really start making improvement and change for our English learners. So with that, there is a clear mission and vision that's outlined in the roadmap policy. And we always, with every district, we share this with them just to reorient and build that foundational knowledge. And it connects back to what Jennifer was referencing about the gap that exists between that current reality and that vision when we're thinking about improvement science. And we don't have to redesign or come up with a new mission or vision because it is already outlined here in the California EL roadmap. Now, with the roadmap, there is a layer of equity that we want to call out, and equity and access is very important to us as individuals and as an organization as well. Throughout the system, we really felt, and I know that Laura Silva, our partner from Washington Unified, she can talk about how the roadmap really kind of fit in with the initial phases of the improvement science process with trying to understand our current system, we really needed to take a deep dive alongside our districts to figure out which of these 4 principles do we need to really target to meet this big goal or this aim that we're setting. And then developing that theory of improvement, that again, those principles created those operational definitions or added some clarity and some ideas about what we might want to, again, do that is embedded in policy and in some of our foundational, guidance documents that are given to us by the state. And, when we do orient our districts, I know we did this with Washington Unified and several other districts that are represented in the Zoom room today. It's nice to see everybody here. We wanted to give a little bit of foundational knowledge building because we know that everybody is in a different place of understanding and implementation with the California Roadmap. So this is just kind of a high-level overview of each of the 4 principles where we can then have conversations about, what do we see as a strength in our district or our school site, depending on their role for principle 1, and exposing them, especially at the beginning, before we start doing our theory of improvement development, giving them a chance to just kind of absorb and learn more about the California Roadmap. And we felt like this is a really important process that we learned from work with some of the other districts that were doing single district EL improvement work that were also, we were supporting with our DA team. And, this became more and more apparent that we needed to take some time to build that foundational knowledge around the roadmap. And then they had more clear language, I think, to help communicate with each other and with us what they wanted to do as far as next steps and change ideas. So we use these as drivers, and you can see, we weren't shy to acknowledge that there are some bumps in the road, and we know that this is a goal for us as a state. And I know the writers of the California Roadmap were really intentional about principle 1. We know and honor that there's no one size fits all approach, that we dig into the different data quest reports for the EL typologies and our RFEP students, as Jennifer said, the at-risk and LL populations. If a district had a lot of newcomers, sometimes that emerged. And, just really kind of using some of these barriers as like root causes to then start fleshing out some next steps and some focus areas. Now, the other 3 principles, principle 2 focuses on instruction. And for those of you who are in the room that's new, I would really encourage you to take time to kind of learn about the high level 4 principles and then dig into those individual elements that you see called out. Principle 2 has the most elements. It's the most kind of heavy and overwhelming one, but this is where the work is happening in the classroom. So if a team comes to us and we know that they want to focus on bringing in teachers to the improvement work and they want to focus on instruction, principle 2 is where we kind of point them to, and we can build drivers and change ideas from this principle. And then there are roadblocks, again, to each of these elements that are common, and we talk about those. We can dig into some root causes and some barriers that can help the district better understand, what maybe are some roadblocks that exist to prevent us from, actualizing and carrying out these policies and these practices that, obviously we know based on research, based on, what is written in these in the policy, what we want to get to eventually, again, our current reality and the gap to meeting these individual drivers and principles. Now, principle 3 is kind of where we focused our work with our EL NIC after working with a couple individual districts and weaving in that California EL roadmap. Principle 3 is where we felt like we needed to start to check that system overall and figure out, again, how are you reclassifying your students? What is the process? Let's map that out. And that really pointed to some leadership, things that needed to, be considered as far as, maybe we had a lot of turnover and maybe, there's the reclassification process lives with one person, which, can really cause some complications about reclassifying students if they're not monitoring, the population of students that are eligible to be reclassified, that pass that level 4. And then the assessments, right? The assessments that we use, throughout the year to monitor progress, but also, the assessments that we might need to use or add that may be missing. And so lots of really great conversations emerged, especially in year one with our ELNIC and the capacity building too that they pointed out. We know that there's lots of kind of checkpoints, as we call them, to make sure, again, that we are creating a really clear system, which again, that's really where the heart of our improvement science work it lives, is looking at the system. And we really feel strongly about starting with, principle 3 when we're kind of looking at some of this DA work and building their awareness about what kinds of things really need to be, in place to make sure we're serving our English learners and our multilingual families to the best capacity that we can. And then just a quick little overview of Principle 4. This is really helpful when we do talk about NICs and when we talk about reclassification, because that is about alignment articulation between sites, between grade levels, what local criteria we use to reclassify for our students, our ELs compared to their EO peers on an ELA basic skills test, talking about the paperwork that's involved in doing the reclassification and supporting and monitoring our students that are reclassified. So lots of things came up. We gave our sites a chance, and obviously I'm like out of breath trying to explain all of this quickly to you. We took our time, we dug into the different principles, and we gave districts a chance to think about, what is working, what celebrations can we, just take the time to honor that is really strongly in place in our districts or our schools, and then what grows could maybe, what root causes and what things might we want to focus on that then became some of the root causes. And we developed some self-reflection rubrics based on some of the original rubrics that came out with the policy. But we made a digital version, we made a Google survey, and in fact, I have a couple examples of one of our local districts that we wanted to collect baseline data around from each of their sites and their leaders. Where did they feel that they, how responsive they were to each of the principles, at the very beginning of the work that we did. So we had them take this survey, and it was really interesting because when we were analyzing the data, a lot of the site leaders, and we gave them a rubric to kind of talk about what does a 2 look like, what does a 3 look like. A lot of sites and leaders said that they were kind of in that 3 category, with a few things being in 2 or in 4 for the intellectual quality of meaningful access. So, this really helped that district kind of figure out then what next steps do we want to focus on when we then ask them to identify some of their strengths, maybe a top strength or an additional strength. And a couple of things emerged, like Principle 1, Element C, school climate was a strength in this particular district. Principle 3, Element B, having adequate resources, they felt was a self-reported strength. And Principle 2C, which was engagement or engaging students in the classroom. So a wide variety of strengths that emerged for this district. And then some growth areas that surfaced was family school partnerships, Principle 1, Element D, and Principle 3, Element D, ongoing capacity building. And these are some pretty common trends that I'm seeing across the districts that are focused on EL improvement work. But it is possible to use the roadmap and those self-reflection rubrics to collect some data. And we plan to do that again with our ELNIC as well to measure and monitor some growth towards some of these principles in these areas. And I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Enns to just talk about kind of, again, weaving that EL roadmap with some of the theories of improvement being kind of using those as the drivers of our work.
And so thank you, Teresa. And as you perhaps were listening to Teresa, seeing like that level of expertise and knowledge, again, coming back to the fact that this is a team effort, and we needed to bring the different layers of our expertise, the different layers of our perspectives and approaches into this. And so when we were looking at what Teresa bringing forward to us the EL roadmap, and that we already have some research-based thinking. We already have some operational definitions. We already have something that has been created for us that says these are drivers toward better outcomes for English learners. And so how could we leverage that and bring improvement science alongside? And so then as our team, we started to look at that. We took those 4 principles and we've said these will be the guidelines for what will be used as drivers in our system. So we use them to look at what were potential barriers in our systems, and then dive deeper into what were root causes of those barriers. And now let's flip those pieces and say what aim might we would develop. And we knew we had districts in different places. And so through some of our own improvement science coaching, we arrived at having a single big dot aim, and then using these 4 principles as the drivers. And then we also, a more mapped out one is the areas underneath the principles we put in as secondary drivers. So for those of you who are a little bit more familiar with improvement science, we got even more specific. And then from there, they chose their focus area based off of the data. And then they started to develop out their change ideas based off of those research-based ideas. Teresa did a lot of work around that also. And so we went from what, oh my goodness, I just dropped his name, visible learning person. He's major, he's important. And I completely spaced on, thank you.
Patty.
Patty. I just spaced in the moment. Hattie did some work also around improvement science, and he talks about developing a theory of the present. Like, this is where we are now, and then we take that and use that. And now, what's our aim based off of our problem? What are our drivers based off our barriers? And what are our change ideas based off our root causes? And that becomes our theory of improvement. And so, just a little improvement science ease here. What is a theory of improvement? That is our working theory now, that we have these high leverage changes that we believe will lead to a desired outcome. And so we visualize that using a driver diagram that has our aim, our driver, and our change idea. And we also had some secondary drivers in there. And then we can articulate that theory by answering the question, by moving through that driver diagram. So what we're saying is, if we want to improve, and we have our big dot aim, if we want to improve outcomes for our English learners, we are going to focus on systems and conditions that support effectiveness, and we're going to focus on this particular change idea. Or we can move the other direction, which says by focusing on this change idea, we will improve systems and conditions that support effectiveness. And by focusing on that, we will meet our aim. And that's how we articulate our theory of improvement. And so this is actually a district's driver, a current working theory of improvement. And they've had some time to go through and look at what their data is showing them, and so where they have decided to focus. And so you can see the big dot aim we chose because we had districts in different places, is that we wanted to improve academic outcomes of our English learners, and we listed what those academic outcomes might be, and then each district chose where they were going to be for their district aim. And our districts are actually aligned in being focused on the LP, which is that English learner progress indicator, and making the improvements in that. And so, and then we have most of our districts are living in the driver that is principle 3 and 4. And so this is an actual working theory right now. And I'm going to pass it back to Teresa.
And just a couple moments before we want to get Laura to share some of the things that she helped us learn about, again, weaving the process of using the roadmap and improvement science to lead to improvement for English learners and our multilingual students. We are improvers and we're learning too. So just this week with one of our EL improvement districts outside of the EL NIC, we realized that sometimes sites have a hard time coming up with change ideas, and they had identified some buckets, and we linked those to the roadmap elements and then gave them some sample change ideas and left it open-ended. You do not have to take these, and some of them are pretty detailed. So, adapt them to make sense to the school or organization and the role that you work in, just giving them some extra scaffolding and examples has helped the process as well. And then we do like to steal things, and we gave credit. I think this was Kalinga Huron that they had these welcome mats for our EL work. So on the back side was their theory of improvement, and on the front side was this kind of reminder from year 1 to starting year 2. The QR code was there, and we had the dates. And so a shout out to Justin on our team for putting this together, because it really, kind of brought year 2 energy, on the first day, and gave them access to everything that they needed to get the work started, coming from year 1 to year 2. But I just want to keep going and introduce a dear friend of mine that we've been working with for the last now 3 years. This is the 3rd year. This is Laura Silva. She is from Washington Unified School District. And, Washington Unified and other districts really helped us learn how to weave, again, the roadmap and improvement science together. And we learned a lot through her 2 years of the multilingual improvement process. So I'm going to have Laura take it away.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Just to give you an idea of where we're located, we're in the middle of the state, just south of downtown Fresno, and it's Washington Unified. Our total enrollment is around 2,500 students, and about 1/3 of our population are English learners. We have 6 sites in our district that you can see there, ranging from preschool to 12. And so one of the ways that we think about how we approached our journey is this little bit of a graphic that shows the roadmap that we've followed. And the first piece of that is being kind of getting prepared, right? Mapping our route out. And so we know that that really involved a lot of preparation and knowledge building. And so some of the really key pieces that we found critical were the seminal works in research, advocacy, and policy for English learners. As Teresa mentioned, the California English Learner Roadmap, obviously foundational, but also the 2 reports that came out prompted by so many years of research that Lori Olson did, irreparable harm, and then renewing our promise. Those have really centered the way that we approach this work. In addition, CalTOG has put out publications to support administrators in implementing the California English Learner Roadmap. And so those administrator toolkits have been really useful in guiding us. They're phenomenally crafted to really show the way and pull on the tools to kind of meet your district where you're at. The English Learner Master Plan Playbook that the Center for Equity for English Learners put out as well has been useful in really guiding us for creating what's called the EL Master Plan. We've opted to call it our strategic plan for multilingual learner success. And lastly, building knowledge by networking, right? Partnering with the county office, meeting colleagues through important advocacy organizations like CalTOG, and then all of the many webinars. It's just really helpful. We assembled our team really intentionally, bringing in our thought partners from the county office, but also selecting people to come to the table who were both district and site administrators, making sure that we're all on the same page, and then inviting educational partners in the classroom to the table, because their input is critical when we think about really implementing classroom level change. Our second piece or phase of our journey involves understanding our system. And that was a series of data dives as the FCSS team led us through looking at multiple pieces of data. And what we know, this is one of the quotes that I just really hold dear, is that we have to see the system before we can improve the system. So, looking at all of it, right? And whatever, even if it's ugly, right? Even if it's things that say oh, that kind of makes me feel weird, like LTEL data, it tells us something's wrong, and that's in our system, right? And so we can do something about it when we can see it. The pieces of data that were really important to us, while quantitative data is important, also qualitative data. I know Jennifer mentioned the journey mapping And you'll see that we had 3 tools that really helped us to take perspective of all of the people in our system, from educators in the classroom, classified staff, front office staff, students, families, parents. And so journey mapping allowed us to really look at what kind of data lived in our system, that we could take the perspective of a student through their educational journey in our system and kind of understand what it was like or what it's been like for them. We were able to do empathy interviews, getting in a room with people, asking them, how our system has impacted them with really specific and intentionally selected questions, to then identify things that we want to maybe come back to as a system. And then going to the Gemba, that involved like seeing, asking questions and understanding what's happening, whether it be observing instruction to understand how students are interacting in the classroom, or observing the way that the teachers are interacting. It just really gives us a better perspective for what's happening in the system. And what we learned is that there was a lot of need for clarity, a lot of need for awareness, specifically around reclassification criteria, which I see is a really common topic in our chat today. And then also around some system changes that we had made with our master schedule at the high school level. Our parents and our families really advocated for partnership. They wanted to understand more about what we were offering their students and how we were partnering with them. And their teachers were really, yearning for capacity building. They want to feel equipped. They don't want their students to be underserved. And they also know that they need more knowledge. And so what we really kind of acknowledge when we see all of these pieces of our system kind of become visible is that our system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets, right? And so when we can see that, then we can start making some adjustments on the design. And that's where the California English Learner Roadmap really is critical. We have to use our policy to guide the changes and the ways that we approach making adjustments, right? And so we move into developing our theory of improvement, which was really centered around identifying barriers, right? Generating change ideas in alignment with policy, and then prioritizing the areas for improvement. Our year 1 aim was a 2-part aim. So we did talk about making the LP indicator a piece of our aim, like we want a certain percentage of students to make progress. And while I can sit here and acknowledge that 55% of students is not enough to make progress, it was more than had been. And so it's just like incremental change, right? And then also really looking at reclassification and knowing that if students are demonstrating English learner or English language proficiency on the summative or summative alternate LPAC, we need to be looking at how our local criteria is either supporting reclassification or not. And we were able to identify that the barriers to our students' success kind of fell into 3 buckets. So it was around monitoring, around communication and clarity, and lastly, instruction and lesson design. I think a guiding principle of UDL is that the barriers in the design, right? Not the learner. And so if we apply that to students, then that means that there's not something wrong with our student, right? There's something going on in the design of the support for them. But I would apply that to our system, and all of us as users of the system and participants, is that the system has been designed a certain way, and so we can remove those barriers, and it doesn't mean something about our personal identity, right? Because none of us wants to think that we've set up a system that's harming kids. But if we've set up a system that isn't getting the result we want, we can start to look at those barriers. So that's what led us into our theory of improvement, and taking our aim and really putting the English Learner Roadmap in the center of that. Like, the principles are our drivers, having operational definitions, so we're all on the same page around what those principles mean and what the elements of the principles are, and then having secondary drivers that are those ideas that we think are going to remove barriers, and then the really specific actions for change ideas. is where we landed on. This is a version. We've got several iterations as we went through the process. One of them, we decided to really condense and align it to just Principle 2. And so, that was in year 1. We really zoomed into, like, when we invited our educational partners from the classroom, that's where most of our work was centered around testing little change ideas out. And so insights that we gained in in year 1 were that around our clarity and awareness, we started to implement different activities on campuses and for families to really heighten the awareness and really clarify what was happening. We started to communicate more about what is the reclassification criteria and demystify the LPAC. We set up different activities or events that would put Principle 1 into action, really drawing on the partnership with families and building our educator capacity through differentiated professional learning and coaching and support. We started to see the impact of some of those changes when we got to see our dashboard last December. And so that we were able to see we've increased, right? So we're moving in the right direction. Our LP indicator showed us that students are making progress. And then one thing that a celebration that we were really excited to see was the longitudinal snapshot of our reclassification of students who had demonstrated proficiency. And so we were able to really narrow down what our criteria was that was in the way and clean that up. But then also we had a better monitoring system for really identifying students and ensuring that everybody reclassifies. And if they don't, or everyone who's eligible, and if they don't, we know who they are and we know why, right? They either moved or they graduated or they have, a criteria that they're still working on because that they're not yet performing at comparable levels to their peers. And so all of that to say, each year we keep learning something new. Our driver diagram or our theory of improvement changes a little bit. This is another iteration. It shows all of the different change ideas that are highlighted in yellow are the things that we're kind of currently implementing across the system. And we really check in on it. How are things going and make adjustments. And so centering user voice is critical in this process. Someone asked about what PDSA is, right? So when we are in that plan, do, study, act cycle, and we're really checking in on things, we're asking people questions at all levels, all educational partners in the systems from, teachers, students, parents, classified staff, paras. What's going well? What's getting in the way? Do you have what you need to do your job? And for a student, that means like, do you have what you need to learn, right? And who's helping you? Who's supporting you? That really allows us to get like a status report about system-wide what's happening and then how we can respond. And the status report allows us to report out, here, this is what we're hearing. And then these are the things that we're doing in response. Green, if they're in colored green, that means we're going to make a change and this is what it looks like. Yellow, we need some more information. We're really thinking about that. Red, we can't really respond to that right now, and this is why. And so that was really helpful for opening up those lines of communication on our team. When we think about next steps, this is like year 2 and beyond in our journey. As Teresa mentioned, we're like in year 3. So we knew that our team really made it clear we needed to work hard to make our work visible. And the way that we continue to do that is through our awareness campaigns, continuing to differentiate professional learning, and like always talking about why we're doing this and what is central, broadening the understanding of the EL roadmap so that all of our staff is aware of it, of what it means to implement it, not shying away from really digging into that so that teachers also can bring the principles to life in their classroom. We incorporated new priorities. There were student groups that were constantly being surfaced as needing additional support, and our system wasn't really working to support students in the best ways that we could. So we know that our dually identified students with IEPs were also identified as multilingual learners. Our newcomer students, we've had a larger influx of students enrolling. And so we have a PL community of practice that's, focused on how can we show up for those students and put some system-wide change in place to better serve our students and our families. And then students who are classified as long-term English learners, if they're not making progress, why? And how can we all share the responsibility of supporting these students, right? And really breaking free from some of the mindsets that were limiting the ways that we show up to support students. And then looking closely at how we can grow our family and community partnerships, bringing our community schools into the loop with that, and like really leveraging all of the resources that we have as an organization to support the students and families that are enrolled. One of the last things that we're really focused on this year is having our strategic plan for multilingual learner success like documented. It's one thing to be making change and to start making changes that you can see an impact, but it's another to get it on paper so that everyone really understands what we mean when we say these are the essential routines of instruction, or these are the guiding principles of an assets orientation and needs responsive school, right? And so that is our work this year, is to come together and really memorialize like some of the changes, and also to then have a place to keep making, change, because not everything is perfect and it does not happen overnight. And so we know it's a constant journey, right? Now that is the last thing. I'm going to pass this back to Jennifer and Teresa for the Q&A portion.
And just to add, thank you, Laura, for sharing your kind of 3-year journey all within like 20 minutes. That was very impressive, and making that, kind of clear with some of the, important pieces that made the most difference to your team. I know one thing as a member, kind of a thought partner from the county that this part of the session with your team was my favorite part, because we ended every session in Washington Unified with an AHA appreciation or question, and everybody stood up and went one by one, and we got to hear everybody's takeaway AHA appreciation. And a lot of it was appreciation, which then really kind of bonded us, I think, even an outsider, not an official member of the district, it's just you left feeling connected and unified in the improvement work that they were committed to. So we would like to ask you to share an AHA, an appreciation or question in the chat, just as a closing activity. And then we are going to also open it up to some questions in the last few minutes. So please, in the chat, give us an AHA you've had in learning something that we've shared, maybe something that you'd like to replicate, maybe a surprise that, a connection you made, an appreciation, that you want to share again, or a question that you're kind of now considering based on the information. And Jennifer, if you see any that you want to call out, feel free to help me read some of those out loud.
And team, Joe and Justin, who are also here from the team, please feel free to jump in, because this was a team effort. So feel free to be part of answering any questions that pop up.
Jenny mentioned the title of your master plan, your EL master plan, calling it a multilingual or strategic plan for multilingual learner success. That was an intentional choice that honors that principle 1 of the California roadmap. And that was all Laura's kind of, determination to make a title fit some of the work and reflect some of the work that they were doing. Lots of conversation about redesignation, community and family involvement, which is again, principal one. So, you know, that was a really key piece, I think, that I noticed for Washington Unified and all the districts that we work with, including the ELNIC, is, you know, there's always going to be that family community connection and that safe, welcoming environment. And, you know, knowing that, you know, there's no one size fits all approach, lots of different EL typologies. We do we keep tethered and we keep coming back to that. And, you know, that surfaces, especially when we do empathy interviews. Three-year plan, theory of improvement model. All right. We'll keep putting in those AHA's appreciation questions. We'll formally kind of show you how you can contact us if you have additional questions. We'll share our emails on the next slide. And, you know, just if you want to add to the chat, or if I think Joe, you know, want to turn it over to you, if there are any brave individuals that want to unmute and ask questions, we have that capability as well. So Joe and Jennifer and Laura, I'll turn it back to you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. And actually, you know what? We are actually getting ready to land this plane. You guys hit it with just a couple of seconds to spare. Awesome. Just wonderful work that you guys over in Washington Unified, Laura, Dr. Jennifer Enns, Teresa Blanchard, the wonderful work you guys are doing. Thank you so much for sharing. The resources are also linked into the presentation that we were continually adding to the chat. So feel free to go over and access those if needed. And so with that, that brings us to the end of our September CERA webinar. And so we hope the information we shared today was relevant and timely to your work. When you close your Zoom, it will launch a very brief survey. We appreciate any feedback you give us, including future webinar topic suggestions, so we can continue to provide CERA webinars throughout the year. And as always, we want to thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you in Burlingame, November, whoop, my light just went out, November 6th through 8th. So once again, if that's something that interests you, please feel free, go on ahead and click on those links. And with that, we hope you have a very great day. Anything, Sherry, we need to add?
Just wanted to say thank you to you. Thank you to our speakers this afternoon, but also just thank you for organizing this webinar. It's great. Lots of information. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. With that, have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you around.
Have a great day.